Howdy folks, Jambareeqi here. Roald Dahl is an acclaimed author best known for his children's fairy tales that are full of magical whimsy, but also have a surprisingly sinister side for kids' stories. Many filmmakers have adapted his books and the results are varied. To be fair, it's quite hard to get his style just right. In this video, I'm going to be counting down my personal picks for the top 5 best and worst Roald Dahl movies, starting with the worst. Little Red Riding Hood. This TV movie is an adaptation of Roald Dahl's revolting rhymes that gives a satirical twist to the Red Riding Hood fairy tale, which frames Red as a villain who kills the wolf herself. Now, it is a bit of a stretch to call this a bad movie, it's just a less good one. There is a quirky appeal here that might engross kids. However, there's something a little off about the whole thing. I cannot be the only one who finds the hyper-realistic animal heads on human bodies a bit too uncanny valley. Sure, it works for Wolfie because he's meant to be scary, but the other critters are supposed to be cute. Throw in a 45-year-old Julie Waters dressed as a little girl, frolicking with these unintentionally creepy creatures, and you end up with a nauseating fever dream. We also get a pint-sized Mimpin narrator, played by Ian Holm. Sure, he makes for a charming host.
There's no end to the strange and wonderful things that you can see. There's magic all around you.
But these scenes do kind of drag, because the film has to keep finding ways to explain how he's able to see what's happening, which sort of ruins the pacing.
I told you, things are never as simple as they seem.
The film lacks the witty humour of the Revolting Rhymes book too. It's supposed to be a funny twist on a classic fairy tale, but the comedy is kind of hit or miss.
Who is it?
The meter man come to read a meter.
Hey? I don't use electricity.
Everything that doesn't work about this TV movie makes me think that it would have been better in animation. Coincidentally, there's a 2-part animated special based on Revolting Rhymes, which actually proves that the story works better animated. The anthro animals fit the art style, the humour excels in a cartoon world, and we get richer characters because the film expands on Dahl's satire. I actually felt a little bad putting this film on here, until I remembered how great the animated version is. The BFG 2016. When orphan Sophie spots a giant at night, said giant grabs her and takes her back to his home, only because he's afraid that she'll blab to human authorities about him. Sophie then gets to learn how this big friendly giant catches dreams for humans, but at the same time, she's in constant danger from a gang of human-eating giants. Steven Spielberg's BFG is a film that never really justifies its 2 hours of runtime. It wants to be this big, epic blockbuster, but struggles to live up to such a feat. So many scenes could have easily been cut down or deleted entirely, and we wouldn't have lost a thing. Like, we didn't need some tragic backstory about another kid that the BFG stole, especially when it turns the story from a giant who grabbed a kid in a panic to a serial child napper. Mark Rylance's BFG certainly has this everyman charm to him, and one hell of a sweet smile. But he's strangely somber and quiet.
So you was an orphan?
Yes, you took me from an orphanage. You didn't know?
I didn't know that.
Look, I get that he's a victim of bullying, so he's bound to be a bit mopey and fragile, but the BFG's fun childlike side barely ever comes out, so he kind of lacks what makes kids fall for him, which hinders his bond with Sophie, because these two don't really have a believable dynamic or chemistry. Sophie is extroverted and chatty, while BFG is noticeably timid and even a little grumpy at times. I don't see how a rich friendship could blossom between such drastic opposites.
I will run away.
Listen you. I is warning you.
The world building for the BFG's dimension is very disappointing as well. Most of it looks like your generic fantasy adventure setting, the kind of Tolkien-esque backdrop we see in every fairy tale movie nowadays. Oh, and Dream Country is an underwhelming and uninspired little spot that's just a big tree with northern lights behind it.
You're not even trying anymore, are you?
And this BFG isn't lively enough to make dream catching fun. However, the worst thing about this BFG movie has to be its soft take on the evil giants. These guys are embarrassing jokes.
I had a boo-boo.
Imagine coddling kids so much that you try to make your human-eating monsters silly?
Well, we is all awake now, we might as well...
frolic.
Yeah, we might as well frolic.
Some kids do like being frightened by a scary baddie, you know? It's what gets them into a story's tension. These evil giants are basically big dumb toddlers with a playground full of toys, who, I'm not kidding, all have an irrational fear of rain. Oh, and boy are they very, very easily defeated in the end. I was expecting a big army versus giant showdown, but nope, it all ends with a whimper. Spielberg's BFG was not only a flop in cinemas, but is also regarded as a low point for Steven's career. I can see why, because it's a painfully average and unnecessarily bloated movie that's way too cowardly to embrace Roald Dahl's horror side. Luckily, Cosgrove Hall did an animated BFG adaptation in the 80s, which happens to be far superior. The Witches 2020. When young boy Charlie ends up meeting a real evil witch in a supermarket, he and his grandma hide away in a luxury hotel. But it turns out that the Grand High Witch and her coven are staying in the same hotel. When the witches catch Charlie, they turn him into a mouse. So he works with his grandma to defeat the witches with their own medicine. Now, apparently this is a very faithful Dahl movie, but as book accurate as it might be, its execution as a film is just, well, baffling. It has so many ideas that either boggle my mind or make it inferior to the cult 90s movie. As soon as the film begins, I was thrown off immediately when I heard comedian Chris Rock narrating. Then we cut to his character as a little kid, which is super distracting when that's the premise of his own sitcom show Everybody Hates Chris.
Always wondered what Grandma kept in that locked closet. Turns out it was full of medicinal herbs and elixirs and old books about ancient healing.
These witches are also very conspicuous, which goes completely against the whole point of their disguises. Like, they all have Joker-style scars on their mouths, which their makeup barely even covers, plus they all talk in a weird, slow way that's clearly unhinged.
Give her a kiss.
These over-the-top clues are just not as scary as the idea of them perfectly blending into society as unsuspecting women. The Grand High Witch is less of a Dahl villain, and more of a Pennywise the Clown ripoff, who, I don't know why, has supervillain-style powers like flight, super strength, and stretch arms. I guess very sensitive young kids will be frightened by her, but I just think she's too excessive. Though to be fair, Anne Hathaway seems to be the only actress having any obvious fun, and totally gets the tone that a Roald Dahl kids movie should go for.
One drop of mouse maker in a piece of candy will transform a dirty little child into a mouse.
There are some decent attempts at nightmare fuel for kids, but like most modern Robert Zemeckis movies, there's an overindulgence in CGI spectacle, which does kind of make me wish that someone else was directing. The hotel itself is way too polished and prim to create any sense of spooky atmosphere. It's just too perfect and normal to work as an effective backdrop for a kid's horror movie. Sure, it's very pretty to look at, but it also sterilizes the horror. The 1990 Witches movie isn't without its flaws, but the witches have more believable disguises.
But I just wanted to give you this. I found him on my walk. He's quite harmless. See? Little boys love snakes.
Every actor is having campy fun on set.
Tell them, Bruno.
The hotel has shady behind-the-scenes things going on. It gives us a spine-chilling backstory for the witches that relies entirely on subtle atmosphere.
There, as if it always had been there, was Erica, locked in the painting, gazing at us.
And the horrifying practical effects have this tangible yet otherworldly quality that computers can't recapture. So yeah, I see The Witches 2020 as a big step down that's severely plagued with truly misguided creative decisions. It really isn't that much different than most shallow remakes of classic kids movies. Breaking Point. This is a TV movie remake of the 60s war film 36 Hours, which was loosely based on Roald Dahl's short story Beware of the Dog. It's about an American soldier called Jeff Pike being captured by the Nazis, who then brainwash him into thinking that he's woken up in an American hospital and that the war is now over, so that they can sneakily dissect enemy secrets from him. 36 Hours was a tense and moody film that expertly relied on great acting, natural writing and tense direction to draw us into a thrilling cat-and-mouse game.
Normandy. Fantastic.
What? Yeah, the truth very often is.
You believe it?
I'm not sure till I question him. He could be talking about a diversionary attack.
This remake, though, it tries so hard to distance itself from the original that it just becomes an unintentional parody. The Jeff Pike in this movie actually catches on very early that the hospital might be staged, so there's no real fun to seeing if the Nazis can pull off their stunt.
Do you expect me to believe that I've been suffering from amnesia for 2 damn years?
Plus, this means that his later epiphany is less dramatic because he already saw the cracks right away. Keep in mind too, this is a late-night TV movie made in the 80s, so it comes with all the cliches you expect from such a product, from obviously cheap production values to cheesy soap opera acting.
Let's get married.
Why?
Ah, come on. Marry the Yank. Make us both miserable.
You can really tell that this film wants to avoid replicating the melodrama of the 60s movie, but its desperate effort to seem more mature and serious in comparison results in a very stuffy atmosphere that's just plain boring to sit through.
Suppose I woke you.
I was washing my hair.
I didn't think you'd come.
I'm your nurse.
I didn't mean that.
No. So what is the problem, Major?
When it's not being dull as dishwater, it's going to extreme lengths to be edgy. Subtlety is thrown right out of the window in favour of on-the-nose seduction scenes and tasteless shock value.
Open his mouth, please.
Oh, and it even goes for typical TV drama gimmicks, like having the actress who plays Jeff's wife also play his nurse. Something that the film draws constant attention to, because apparently we're too stupid to spot the similarities ourselves.
I don't want somebody around who looks like Diana with eyes like hers, and legs, hips like hers.
Please don't do this.
I want to ache every time I see you.
Only to never do anything clever with said novelty casting. Because the nurse gets killed off, the film has such little faith in its audience's attention span that it later decides to shamelessly rip off the classic war movie The Great Escape and make Jeff bolt away from the fake hospital on a speeding motorbike. What even is this movie anymore? If you want an improvement on Breaking Point, then look no further than its original. Sure, 36 Hours was kind of melodramatic, but so were most war films made during that time. It took Roald Dahl's strange premise and grounded it in its own reality. It was compelling through simplicity and emotion. Breaking Point is nothing more than tacky, and Dahl cinema at its lowest. Tom and Jerry, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This is an animated remake of the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka movie that inserts the cat and mouse cartoon duo Tom and Jerry into sidekick roles for the classic story of poor Charlie Bucket and how he wins a golden ticket for a tour through Willy Wonka's magical candy factory. Some of you might be thinking that this film is a joke, but no, this is a real movie.
Charlie, look, there's Tom.
Tom, what happened to you?
Nothing about this Frankenstein of a project works. You see, the film is so obsessed with forcing Tom and Jerry fights into whatever is happening that important scenes are cut out or skipped over. There's hardly any time spent on Charlie's poverty, and no exciting build-up surrounding the mystery of the Wonka legend, which are two of the most important emotional beats needed for the factory adventure. The special magic of the original is often ruined by the cat and mouse too. Like, remember the penny that Charlie finds to buy the winning Wonka bar? Well, turns out that Tom and Jerry dropped it there, which makes it way less of a whimsical miracle. Oh, and once the tour starts, Tom and Jerry split off into their own plot, in which they try to battle Wonka's rival Slugworth in every factory room, because the filmmakers clearly didn't know how to include Tom and Jerry on the tour.
What? Get back, you fool! Sorry, coming through.
Run, fellas! We can't let Slugworth get that gobstopper!
Speaking of Slugworth, he gets a bigger villain role here, even though we know that he's supposed to be a Wonka plant. The film tries so hard to convince us that he's a baddie, that when the actor twist actually happens, it's way harder to believe, because the film leans so heavily on his villainy.
You will tell Wonka nothing, small mouse.
Slugworth!
It seems the three of you have become a danger to my master plan.
As an animated remake, it does nothing at all special. It's almost a scene-for-scene, word-for-word carbon copy of the Gene Wilder movie, but with cheap, tacky straight-to-video quality animation, full of unintentionally weird or creepy cartoon faces. Sure, Slugworth's musical number has some creative, colourful imagery, but that's just one scene out of the entire film. It tries to imitate the 70s film so accurately that it never finds its own identity or unique art style. It's not interested in updating an old movie for new audiences, but rather exploiting the memories of those who grew up with a retro classic.
The Candyman can, cause he mixes it with love and makes the world taste good.
This movie was not a passionate labour of love. It was just Warner Brothers cynically smashing together two of the most popular IPs and hoping for quick bucks. It's creatively bankrupt nostalgia bait that insults the legacies of both Roald Dahl and Hanna-Barbera. This movie could have been about Jerry the Mouse winning a golden ticket and Tom, as Willy Wonka, trying to kill Jerry in every factory room. This would have been faithful to the Tom and Jerry cartoon formula, while still being a little true to Dahl's dark fantasy vision. Oh, well, at least there's going to be some golden tickets in my best list. The BFG 1989. Cosgrove Hall's BFG tells the same story as Spielberg's adaptation, but at a much snappier pace. It doesn't wax its runtime or marinate on a scene for ages, it simply tells a solid story of an orphan befriending a dopey giant. This movie's BFG is a quirky and bubbly man with a sincere passion for everything he does. It's kind of inspiring in a way. Despite the threat of evil giants in his world, he's still very upbeat and full of wonder. A lot of his charm stems from a brilliantly goofy voiceover from David Jason, who plays the BFG with joy and tenderness.
It's getting better every time, this eggs and baking.
Oh, and the world building for the BFG's world is phenomenal. It's all alien and dreamlike in design. There's a fairy tale charm to it, but also an ominous eeriness as well. I can't even really compare it to anything because it's so unique.
First person ever to come here.
Of course you is.
It's also wild how hard the filmmakers went on the movie's horror, especially when it comes to the threat of the cannibalistic giants. I'm gonna say it, these huge monsters are the scariest children's movie villains I've ever seen. Even as an adult, I still get the heebie-jeebies from them. They're murderous, angry beasts with horrible nightmarish designs, and their very presence makes my heart jump out for Sophie's safety. The movie develops the giant's intimidation so well that we're left chewing our nails frantically once the military step in. If the army can't beat these guys, then who can? It's heart-pounding stuff. But at the same time, Seth Finale also pushes the BFG to find his own courage and discover his strength as a giant. We also buy into Sophie and BFG's bond throughout their adventure together too, because what kid wouldn't be endeared by a giant like this? He's like a folksy granddad with the innocent, silly mind of an 8-year-old. Their time together comes off so natural that it's heartbreaking when they have to part, but equally lovely that Sophie gives up a luxury life at Buckingham Palace for a humble family with the BFG. Oh dang it, now I'm crying again. Oh.
I is not having any palace for you.
I know.
Well, let's be going home then.
Cosgrove Hall's The BFG is a movie that fully embraces the darkness and the light of Dahl's imagination, giving us a wholesome chosen family story that touches the soul, while also daringly challenging what kids can handle as horror audiences. It's a classic of British animation. Fantastic Mr. Fox. Mr. Fox has now settled down with a family, but he sentimentally misses the exciting adventures he had when he posed as a young fox. So, he starts secretly heisting the farms of the villainous Bogus, Bunce and Bean, only to enrage said farmers so much that they become desperate for revenge, forcing every animal to dig themselves deep underground for safety. Wes Anderson is not the first filmmaker that comes to my mind when you say Roald Dahl, but actually his weird atmosphere and quirky comedy go hand in hand with Dahl's world. The end result is this charming blend of Anderson and Dahl that's kind of hypnotizing, made all the more mesmerizing by the detailed stop-motion animation.
Where'd you get this chicken?
I picked it up at the Five and Dime last night on my way back.
It's got a Bogus Farms tag around its ankle.
Huh.
While the animal characters have been heavily humanized, the film still acknowledges that these are wild critters, whether they communicate disagreement with snarly fights, or eat their food like predators. Heck, Mr. Fox's character arc is heavily seated in his complicated feelings over his roots as a wild animal, and how this plays into his mundane present. While his impulsive need to recapture his nostalgia comes at the cost of others' lives, and he really needs to learn responsibility for his reckless ego.
I think I have this thing where I need everybody to think I'm the greatest, the quote-unquote fantastic Mr. Fox. And if they aren't completely knocked out and dazzled and kind of intimidated by me, then I don't feel good about myself.
He does come to realize that he doesn't have to pick between civilized life or natural animalism, because every animal has an inherent talent that can be adopted into their everyday world and their fight against the farmers.
Mole, Talpa Europea, what do you got? I can see in the dark? That's incredible, we can use that, Linda.
Got it.
Rabbit, Oroctologous cuniculus. I'm fast. You bet you are, Linda.
Got it.
Where you come from and who you are now don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can build on your roots. The high expectations upon Mr. Fox also pass down to his eccentric son Ash, who feels the need to live up to his amazing father, going to show how toxic it is for adults to pressure kids with extreme standards for fantastic.
You mean you think I could end up being as good as my dad if I keep practicing?
Your dad? Your dad was probably the best whack-bat player we ever had in this school.
Instead of appreciating said kid for who they are.
I kept wondering, who is this little boy gonna be?
Or girl.
Or girl, right, because at that point we didn't know. Ash, I'm so glad he was you.
Our trio of farmer villains are terrific too, with Bogus and Buns playing funny, dry sidekicks.
Any Fox problems? Are you joking?
It's horrible.
We're miserable.
He's laughing at us.
It's humiliating.
We're furious.
I don't even want to talk about it.
And Bean chomping on the role of Mastermind Hunter.
But I've already figured out where this fox lives, and tomorrow night we're going to camp in the bushes, wait for him to come out of the hole in this tree, and shoot the cuss to smithereens.
It's their deranged determination to catch Mr. Fox that drives the film's gripping tension. But there's also some great comedy to come from their frustrated mood too.
Zappy-za-yappy-yo. What are you singing, Petey?
Just making it up as I went along, really.
That's just weak songwriting. You wrote a bad song, Petey.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is what we get when a filmmaker with a very unique style embraces the spirit of Dahl, but also mixes in their own ingredients to give us a fresh take on an old classic. It's an endearing animated movie that will spellbound you. Matilda. Matilda is a gifted child who loves to read and has a lovely, supportive teacher called Miss Honey. But her parents are terrible, awful people, and her principal, Miss Trunchbull, is a crazy ex-Olympian who loves cruel punishments against kids for dumb reasons. Danny DeVito's Matilda is a nostalgic classic for me, but even when I put my nostalgia aside, I still think that this is a great movie as an adult. It transfers the original story from England to the USA, but this change actually works, because we end up with a dark satire on American culture that still bites almost 30 years later, taking jabs at everything from shady business.
The sawdust quiets the ears and lets the engine run as sweet as a nut for a couple of miles.
Daddy, that's cheating.
Of course it's cheating. Nobody ever got rich being honest.
To the corrupt US government.
I really hope you have a search warrant. According to a constitutional law book I read in the library, if you don't have one, you could lose your job or even go to federal prison.
But it's also just a really entertaining tale of a neurodivergent child fighting against evil authority figures. Like, I love the way DeVito directs Matilda's pranks. There's a palpable tension to each prank setup, which is always followed by a funny, satisfying payoff after. However, it's Pam Ferris's Miss Trunchbull that steals the villain's spotlight. Ferris's Trunchbull is basically Quentin Blake's illustration come to life, and was turned all the way up to 10.
If you can't handle the little brat, I'll lock her in the chokey! Get it?
She's a larger-than-life personality, but also a very frightening antagonist. Especially when Matilda and Miss Honey enter the Trunch's house, which should belong to Miss Honey, and the mean principal catches on. As scary as our villains are though, Trunchbull's niece, Miss Honey, is the sunshine in Matilda's harsh life. These two need each other, abuse victims who bring out the best in one another and give each other the love that's missing from their lives.
I wanted to stay with Miss Honey. Miss Honey doesn't want you. Why would she want some snotty, disobedient kid?
Because she's a spectacularly wonderful child and I love her.
This film really excels at developing Matilda's trademark telekinesis too. It's not something she magically perfects overnight or suddenly gets great at in the finale. We're given a really fun montage of her exploring what she could do with her powers, and she's handed many chances to practice her telekinesis before the climax too, all while DeVito cleverly works with the limitations of 90s effects.
No more Miss Nice Girl.
1996's Matilda is one of those rare gems that will enchant and excite kids, while also speaking to adults on a deeper level. It's a truly brilliant fantasy black comedy from a director who completely understood the assignment. Matilda the Musical. Inspired by the hit stage show created by comedian Tim Minchin and playwright Dennis Kelly, this movie turns Dahl's beloved book into a feature musical. Deciding where to rank the Matilda movies was a pretty tough task for me. DeVito's Matilda does some things better than the musical, and the musical movie does some things better than DeVito's adaptation. Then it hit me. 1996's Matilda is a delicious chocolate gâteau full of flavour and texture, but Matilda the Musical is like a wedding cake. The same wonderful quality of bakery, but with more layers. You see, the Matilda Musical has the advantage of being set in England, with British filmmakers at the helm, so we end up with something far more true to Dahl's own childhood, served against a fittingly miserable British backdrop. Like most European kids' movies, it has an edge over its Hollywood counterpart. The Trunchbull gets even more hands-on. Miss Honey's abuse trauma is more gut-wrenchingly authentic, and there's an overall dystopian feel to Cruncham Hall.
I have become aware that some of you are not yet in class. Correct this. You have 5 seconds to comply.
Oh, and Alicia Ware is jaw-droppingly good as Matilda, giving one of the best child acting performances I've ever seen, as she conquers the complex emotions required, embodies the punk rebellion of Matilda, and smashes every song with success. She's dang talented for her age.
Miss Trunchbull has been humiliated and she is capable of awful things.
I'm not scared of her.
You should be. She's dangerous.
So am I.
The movie also greatly expands on the material, not in a shallow, superficial way, but to the advantage of cinematic storytelling, making for a richer tale that deserves its 2 hours, by giving us a subplot involving Matilda telling her own story, which turns out to be Matilda's powers receiving the truth about Miss Trunchbull's dark past, and the terror she inflicted on Miss Honey's family. A twist that crushes us hard as an audience, and makes Matilda's powers even more valuable as a narrative tool for the film.
So they were your parents?
What? Who?
The people in my story. I thought I was making it up, but it's real. It's you. It's your life.
Let's be frank though, it's Tim Minchin's unforgettable songs that give this adaptation the upper hand. Minchin's striking musical numbers warmly sympathise with our characters' suffering, while also embracing the intelligence and anarchy of the material. I've seen Matilda the Musical twice now, and I've cried like a baby on both times. It's so great that it's made me even more excited to see the original Broadway show one day.
Sometimes you have to be a little bit naughty.
Before I reveal my number 1, I'd just like to remind folks to Wonka. This recent released prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is all about the candy maker's origins. I knew that at least one Wonka movie would end up in my best list, but I'm kind of surprised that it was this one. But then again, Paul King, director of things like Paddington, Paddington 2, and The Mighty Boosh, has made a track record of amazing content. He's got a weird imagination, but he also understands wholesomeness and whimsy. And that comes out so well in Wonka. While this is very much Paul King's own idea of where Wonka started, I feel like it really understands the spirit and the tropes of Roald Dahl. Probably more than any other Roald Dahl movie. I also think that Timothée Chalamet is a pretty damn good Willy Wonka. He's very good at the eccentric whimsy of the character, but he also has this tenderness and naivety. Heck, I'd say that Chalamet, in his own subtle, nuanced way, takes what Depp did, takes what Wilder did, and adds his own youthful spin to the character.
This marshmallow.
That's right. Harvested from the mallow marshes of Peru.
And caramel. But it's
salted. With the bittersweet tears of a Russian clown.
As a whole, the movie is very much about the creativity of chocolate, what you can do with chocolate, the unlimited imagination of chocolate, how chocolate can be inspired if you put your mind to it. But there's also this beautiful message about how making chocolate isn't just about making chocolate, it's also about who you share that chocolate with. And it's this sentiment that gives the movie its heart. This definitely has Dahl's dark side to it as well. Because there's this dark, sinister conspiracy going off involving all the different rival chocolate makers and the police and so many other things, and there's so many layers to this conspiracy. This is not a twee, cheesy, corny movie. It has its grim side. This is also a musical, and I really enjoyed the songs. I'll admit that one of them is a bit too short, but that's not even really a complaint. Every single song is in line with Paul King's vision. There's not a single song in this film that I'm thinking, hey, why is that there? Why do you put that there? Are you just indulging in a chance to have a musical number? No, every song plays into the story. So those were all my choices for the top 5 best and worst Roald Dahl movies. Which is your favourite Roald Dahl movie and why? Let everyone know in the comment section below. I've been Jambareeqi. Cheerio, folks.